to him and the cool air. His hot mouth chased the chill away as he freed her from the remaining clothes that may have clung to her supple form with equal parts power and passion. Alex, not to be outdone, tore at his clothes as well, pinned by the weight of his hardened form pressed against her. She was desperate to feel the heat of his skin against hers. She couldn't hear or breathe anything except him right now, and she thought she might drown in him, and at this moment she was okay with that. She snuggled closer, enjoying the way her body molded into his. His every small touch sent shivers throughout her being. She kissed him again as he uncovered the secrets of her, racing steadily along with the contours of one another's bodies, fighting to keep their mouths connected to each other, their bodies close. His hands ran from her raven hair, tugging her head back gently, exposing her bare throat. His tongue traveled from collarbone to her jaw and back again. He wound his fingers into her hair to keep her close. At that moment she knew she wanted to stay that way forever. Learning one another from the beginning, every secret their bodies held from one another. They remained in constant contact, could not stop touching. Hair, shoulders, lips, back, ankles, everything. Her fingers traced his battle scars, and his calloused hands explored the flawless silk of her skin. They clung together, entwined in the eternal embrace of love. He moved down the length of her, mouth resting above her creamy thigh. He could feel the beat of her heart through the artery there, and it was intoxicating. But the hunger he felt before, the bloodthirst, was replaced with a deeper, more carnal hunger. Her legs wrapped around his neck, drawing his lips and skillful tongue where she wanted them most. Arching her back in response to the sudden warmth and gentle tingling sensation she felt overwhelming her core. His fingers gently spread apart her lower lips, pushing his tongue against her, working his way into her pink folds before finding her pink nub, gently sucking before allowing his invasive tongue to flicker over it. His tongue was every bit as skilled as his sword, slowly working along her moistened slit, causing her hips to move in response. He loved this, watching her become lost on a whole new plateau of ecstasy. His soft pink muscle worked her a bit faster, keeping a steady pace, alternating between short, fast licks and long, slow laps along her swollen button. He could read her body like a book. With his senses enhanced to such heightened levels, her temperature rising to new heights, the voluminous amounts of moisture her body produced, the louder her moans became, and of course the breathing. She was having to take more and more as time went on. They were becoming shorter, sharper, more desperate. She had to be getting close. The revelation brought a smug grin to his lips, though it was one that remained hidden from her sights, where he presently remained. Her thighs fastened around his face, and she gasped. The sounds she made were incredible. Laughter mixed with pure, desperate pleasure. She wasn't at all shy about letting him know how much she liked what he was doing. Tongue worked feverishly to drive her wild. The more she moaned, the wetter she got, the louder she became, the faster he would thrust his nimble muscle into her. But now, as her body told him, it was time for the grand finale, at least hers anyway. He held her tightly so that unless she really tried, she couldn't get away. Her breath became faster, and the sounds she made were more frantic. She didn't hold back, couldn't, as a tugging sensation arose from deep within her belly, sending wave after wave of bliss crashing through her core. And like a fawn drinking from a pond, every ripple was felt, and he was in heaven. It's the only thing that feels better than diving into a cool lake on a sweltering day, or biting into a juicy sandwich when you're starving. An orgasm is just incomparable. Her whole body ached. She acted as if there were a terrible hollow emptiness inside her. She was more conscious of him than she had ever been of anything or anyone in her life, of the shadow of light stubble across his jaw where he hadn't shaved, of faint white scars that dotted the skin of his shoulders and throat, and more than anything else, of his mouth, the crescent shape of it, the slight dent in the center of his bottom lip. She put her hands lightly around his neck. His skin was burning hot to the touch. She could feel the muscles of his shoulders, hard and smooth, and she knew of only one thing that would fill the hollow pit of emptiness within her. She pulled him closer and strained upward. Her mouth was sweet, and her velvet tongue came out to touch his, tasting, testing, tentative, exploring the feel and texture as he did. She could taste herself on him, feel his desire for her brush against her still quivering loins. His body shuddered every time her hips moved slightly, and he felt her wetness open up and kiss the tip of his hard length, almost beckoning him in. Feeling this powerful man shudder with weakness at her whim caused a soft chuckle to stick in her throat. A wicked grin came to her hungry lips as she wrapped her slender arms under his, holding him against her as they kissed, tauntingly moving her hips to further drive him mad. Arius tried to focus on her lips, on her scent, on her taste, anything and everything but the desires of man that beckoned him to simply take that which she freely offered him. Her kiss was his breath of air. He needed it to breathe while drowning in that ocean of fiery passion that had ignited in his heart and soul, his body consumed by the flames of desire. He took his time admiring her beauty, visible even in the shadows, the arch of her cheekbones, the pout of her mouth, her large expressive eyes. He lifted her chin and brought their lips together. It was the kiss of an ardent lover, communicating with his mouth what he desired her. He couldn't get enough of her lips because, at that moment, neither of them moved, neither of them breathed. They just existed together. The kiss was artless, still desperate, but only because it was real, the most honest, truthful moment they'd ever shared with anyone. His rough hands slid up silken flesh, curving along the nape of her neck as he bent her head across his arm and kissed her, softly at first, and then with a swift gradation of intensity that made her cling to him as the only solid thing in a dizzy, swaying world. His insistent mouth was parting her shaking lips, sending wild tremors along her nerves, evoking from her sensations she never knew she was capable of. In weaker moments, she almost felt guilty of never feeling something so strong, so passionate and intense as she felt with Arius. Was this emanating from the heart, or a side effect of vampirism heightening everything? With a wicked spark in her eyes, she took hold of his hips with her legs, guiding him into her. Arius staved off a heated groan, feeling himself drowning into her. His hardened desire swept out against her wanting lips as she let him in, begged him in. He filled her completely, stroking the most sensitive spots and retreating only to return. She wouldn't be able to hold back the moan that escaped as she arched into him, bringing her supple breast in contact with his chest, and he made a sound like a growl. It was a heady feeling, that power, and she knew she would do whatever she needed to hear it again. She was tight. He was slow, deliberate. Moaning, she dug her nails into his nape, her breasts flushed, her nipples lush beads he wanted to roll against his tongue. She clenched around him, her wetness molten. It took his brain a microsecond to make the connected feeling. He started off slow and searching because he needed to keep himself in check now more than ever. His hand stroked down her sides, reminding himself of her beauty. The future, for these few minutes, was forgotten, left behind. Whatever lay ahead of them was meaningless. She would feel his strong, toned body above hers, pressing hers to the ground. The strong, muscled length of him could be felt against her every softness. His face was tender as he watched her. Although she didn't see it, she was lost in the sensations, the power of his passion, and the gentleness of his love. The steady motion of his hips made her feel as though she were adrift on the sea. She pulled him closer, wrapping her legs around his waist, trying to hold on to him as visions of her carnal thoughts danced at the forefront of her mind. This connection, this moment, this feeling was why she wanted to live. This movement made life too good to give up. Before she remained alive to avenge her